So, hello, we've got about 10 people already jumping on in addition to my panelists. Welcome to Childcare 101. As you are jumping on here, I would love for you to go into the chat function. And if you could just share where you are joining us from, where in the world are you dialing in from? And then if you are expecting, let us know when your due date is, or if you have children, if you could share how old they are, what their ages are, and that'll give us a really great sense of who is in the audience and where you're calling from. New York City expecting in May. Congratulations. What a wonderful time. Western Massachusetts. Oh, I hope you're digging out of the snow and a baby turning 1. Oh, that's a milestone. At Vivvi, 1 is officially a toddler. So that's a big milestone here with us. New York City, 2 months, 20 months, Little Neck, New York, 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, 24 weeks, San Francisco. Welcome. Awesome. Well, that's a really a great way to start, just to understand that we're calling in from all over the place with one area of focus. What is this thing called finding childcare? So Childcare 101. We're so happy to have you today, for sure, and especially at noon when you're probably multitasking behind the curtain and doing so many things while you hopefully get some answers about the childcare solution for your world. I'm Gretchen Richer, and I am the Director of Family Experience at Vivvi. Vivvi is an early learning and childcare organization, and we are on a mission to reinvent childcare and early learning for today's families, doing it in a number of different ways, and you'll see some representation of that in a few minutes. In New York, our campuses specialize in learning and care for ages 6 weeks to 5 years. And then nationally, our in-home program, which really takes all of our teachers and everything about the school model and places it right inside your homes, expands our coverage to literally meet families wherever they are. In addition to working at Vivvi, I am also the mother of a 4-year-old who attends Vivvi's preschool program 2 times a week, but I also have a nanny and experience with group childcare when Noah was a toddler. And currently I am navigating a situation where my toddler may jump in to this conversation at any moment, so I'm really keeping it authentic here. My colleague Jessica will kind of take the reins if that happens. So she's my backup. She is my village. And I'm really happy that you're here for this topic, which will never become irrelevant. And now more than ever, I think it's crucial that we can keep creating spaces and sharing stories and advice with one another so that we can all get closer to finding a solution or multiple solutions that work. So I hope you're already feeling like you're chalking up a win just by showing up and being here today. And so we're going to do just that for about the first 30 to 45 minutes, sharing our own stories, our own perspectives and advice, and also trying to answer a lot of the questions that you sent to us in advance along the way. So I'll just share a couple little logistics, and then we'll let these wonderful ladies dive in and share their stories. So again, we'll speak to this panel. They each have a very unique story and a very unique childcare journey for the first 30 minutes or so. And I'll ask them a couple questions. As I said, many of them stem from the questions that you have asked, which means hopefully you'll get a lot of your answers today, but also that you're not alone in this search. We're all kind of searching through and sifting through the same things. And then we'll move on to take some questions from the audience. So you are welcome to pop a question into the chat function at any time, but please know at the end of this time, we'll be officially opening up. So with that, I would love to introduce the ladies who are on screen here. If you could, for me, ladies, do me a favor, let me know who you are. If you have a child or children, who they are and what their ages are, what you do in life professionally, and then any important tidbits along the way that you have gone through to share your childcare journey. That would be great. So Jenny, why don't you jump in and start us off?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Moniz. Thank you, Gretchen, for having me here today. This is a topic that I feel really strongly about in terms of sharing any guidance and supporting moms in any way about, because we all need childcare in some shape or form. Obviously, we need to figure out what works best for our family, but a little bit about my background before becoming a mom. I'm now a mom of two, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. But before that, I worked in early childhood as a daycare and nursery school teacher, starting as young as infancy, and then became an education director at a place like Vivvi, but Vivvi didn't exist then, and at several places. So I ran infant and toddler programs based on, research-based best practices, and I really loved group care settings, and early socialization for children in their earliest years. I worked closely with supporting parents. And yeah, depending on where I was working, it had different shapes and forms, part-time, full-time, whatnot. When it came time to have children of my own, I always envisioned that my babies, when they came, however many there were going to be, would accompany me in my job working in daycares. But I struggled to become pregnant. I went through IVF and had to I saw the need for more flexibility, which is really hard to have in that type of setting. Of course, there's so many families depending on all of the people that work in an early childhood facility. And I saw that while I needed that flexibility to conceive, I would probably need even more of that flexibility once I became a parent myself. So I ended up sharing all the things that I learned working in early childhood once I became a mom, and how I was implementing that at home. And I created an Instagram account at the time called Mo Mommies. And it eventually led to co-founding a play space in New York City for parents, 0 to 2, who didn't choose daycare, for whatever reason, and for their caregivers to come to, not a drop off, just sort of mommy and me, nanny and me, grandma and me, and all the male counterparts as well, just anyone and me with their babies 0 to 3. And so that's what I'm currently doing, sharing my motherhood journey on Instagram and managing, and creating play spaces in New York City and hopefully beyond. And we support our community a lot with childcare, how, what to look for in hiring a nanny, what to look for when choosing childcare or daycare. And before I let these lovely ladies introduce themselves, I would say that I think that there's 3 most important questions to ask when it comes to whatever you choose. If you're at a daycare or, hiring someone, the most important is knowing that they love young children. I don't think that's something you can teach. And I think everyone in theory loves young children, but being with them day and night, and children that aren't your own. And that's something that you feel. And I certainly know from people who go to Vivvi, they feel it there. Um, and I felt that when we hired a nanny, which I needed to do for several reasons, which I'm sure that we'll get into. I wrote them down. Ask whoever, the teacher or caregiver, what excites them about working with young children. I think you can see in their response, their eyes glow and their smile when they're talking about that, or you don't. And what are the qualities that they feel a great caregiver, nanny, educator, or teacher would possess? I think we focus a lot on educational credentials, but when it comes to young children, I think warmth, nurturing, supportive, caregivers are what's most important, no matter what you choose. So I know that was a mouthful, so I'll let both Crystals introduce themselves, or Gretchen, you kind of lead where we're going next.
Thanks, Jenny. I love that. Thank you for sharing all that information. I love it. I got 2 nuggets that I gleaned from you too. Is I appreciate for those of you who are still have not yet become a mother and who are still in their pregnancies, it's okay to also appreciate you may want one thing and you may be thinking of one path prior to having your baby, and you may completely change your mind afterwards. So it's okay to also change your mind and let your head and your heart follow that pathway. And I was just going to say, if people are writing down questions to ask their nanny, those were, or their childcare provider, those were really great starting interview questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Crystal Balram. Very formal since we've got two Crystals.
Thank you, Gretchen, and thank you for having me here. So my name is Crystal. Oh no, that's okay. So my name is Crystal. I have 3 children. My eldest is 6. Her name is Yui. She's a great kid. And I have 2 3-year-olds, Ava and Axel, who currently attend Vivvi Hudson Yards. And right now, well, they started Vivvi in June of last year, so it's very recent. And so before I became a mom, I was a chemical engineer. I was a principal one chemical engineer for a company. And after having Yui, I realized that the work was just started getting more demanding. I powered through. We had a combination of a nanny at the time, as well as taking her to a twos program for a little bit. And we've just been trying to gather that space. So when we figured all of those things out, I was very confident. I said, okay, I know what I'm doing next time I get pregnant. We got pregnant next time. And then I found out we were having twins. Just totally reset the clock. Totally changed my whole ideas of what now I'm going to do. But I knew I wanted to give my twins the same experience as the oldest. Come to find out, I couldn't actually do that either. So when you're in your childcare journey, flexibility is key, and not to beat yourself up that you cannot exactly replicate from child 1 to child 2. So when Axel and Ava, when I was pregnant with them, I did have to leave work. The pregnancy became very difficult. I had to be on bed rest as early as about 15 weeks along. I don't know if any moms have any experience with the incompetent cervix, but it's very common when you're carrying multiples. So I was home, and then I stayed home, and the twins came a little early, as most twins do. NICU stay for a little bit, and had a little bit of complication. So we really didn't get out the house until about them being about anywhere between 4 and 6 months. And actually, I went to Union Square Play to fill that gap, actually.
You looked familiar, and I remember when you came and they were so young, and we just took them from you and said, take off your shoes. I'll let you talk, but oh my God.
No, that's exactly what happened. So when I went to Union Square Play, I juggling two babies, and I was like, let me wash your hands, let me take off your shoes. I took them to Dion's dancing class, and they came. I think it was Yu who came, and another gentleman who worked there as well at Union Square Play. They just came. They were like, come, let me have your baby. And they just took them. Dion, the teacher, even took them, and we were dancing. So I was like, how am I going to dance with 2 babies? But they were very supportive, very supportive. So to fill in that dead space between, having 2 very small, smaller than average babies, and then COVID, right, which is a whole hurdle that I'm sure we'll all get to at some point. Union Square Play was my outlet. So I wasn't able to do the nanny, wasn't able to do the twos program. Union Square Play was where I went. And Union Square Play had, I'm just doing a commercial for you. Union Square Play had tons of additional resources so that I can streamline my ever so changing agenda of being a parent. And they brought in 2 lovely ladies that actually kind of helped me streamline how I thought about schooling, how I thought about childcare placement. If you hear noise in the background, those are my 3 little ones. They have to be home with me for the time being. So there's that. They will come in the background. Um, so they really did help with streamlining that kind of care, and that's where I kind of came in and found Vivvi. In that model, I just did a simple Google search of all of the things that I valued, and Vivvi came up. So of course I made a couple of calls, I did all of the paperwork, and we've been there ever since, and it's been very great, and I am very grateful for this entire experience. Yes.
Thanks, Crystal, for sharing, and I'm so excited to hear more about what made you think about group childcare for them, as well as Vivvi. And it's always been such a wonderful time when I got to see you and help with drop off at the front door. So I always felt like we had a nice moment, and I'm glad we're having another moment today. And finally, Crystal Covington, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your journey.
Hey there. So my little one, he's almost 3. He'll be 3 in April. I have another one on the way, also due in April. But I created this little world with Vivvi after I was one of those moms that had said, I'm going to be like my mom, and I'm going to be home, and I'm going to have my kid home with me. And then a year in, and we had this lovely schedule. My mother-in-law was taking my son twice a week for quite some time. She was kind of not loving it. 2 whole days a week with a kid was too much for her. She really is not built for that. She said, I wish I was my mom, but I can't do this forever. And then the pandemic hit, and I lost her because she was kind of scared to be around us, because she's like, I don't want to catch COVID. I had another babysitter that was basically a friend that used to volunteer for me at my women's organization that I lead. And we stopped having her because same reason. And so I was suddenly with nothing after having kind of this little balancing act of having 2 days with grandma, and then had to figure it out. And so I run my own business from home. I'm a marketing consultant. I've done my share of having marketing consultations and conversations with a baby crying in the background. It has happened. It's the thing that people still hire me. I don't know. It does not deter them. But having somebody, I started with 8 hours, and having somebody that could just be here during set hours where I could have phone calls. And it took a year before my family was okay with me even doing that. They were so scared that I had to, just take on this kiddo for a full year by myself. And then finally I convinced them, and like, she'll wear a mask, and she'll, she's trained and all these things. And so they bought into that. I got my Vivvi person, and it changed everything. And then we recently increased hours because now I've been able to grow my business. The families understands that, see, we haven't caught anything, we're good. So we keep going with this. And so now I have 20 hours of care, which means I'm really able to talk to clients and grow. So in order for me to grow as a business owner, I really needed childcare. And I totally understand all those moms that will want to be there with their kids for at least the first year primarily, and you do what you can to do that. For me, I had to have some help, and he's still here with me. He can still see mom working, and so it works out really well.
Thank you so much. Thanks all of you. There's so many great questions that I want to ask out of all of this. And Crystal Covington, I think I'm going to start with you, in that Vivvi in Home is kind of a wonderful combination of getting the one-to-one. So it would be very similar to a nanny or a babysitter, and you're not taking your child into group childcare, but there's a whole learning and development component that we like to layer on top of that care space. And so as you were looking, it sounds like you were especially with COVID, you were very invested in more of an in-home solution. Would that be wise to think? And still, yes, with him being 3. And so I'm wondering obviously health and safety were priorities. where did you begin your search looking at nannies and looking at in-home programs, and how did you sort of differentiate and decide which path to go to, or what people to see? Did you think through nanny services or placement services?
I didn't really understand the concept of nanny in my mind. I thought a nanny was someone here all the time. And then people who had them did the au pair services where they lived in your house, and we're just not keen on that concept. So I think I didn't get what a nanny would do, and I didn't need that much coverage. I just needed to be able to have meetings. And so I don't even remember. I think I'd searched probably every week for months to figure out if there was something out there for me. And then I ran into the Vivvi concept and was like, if because they had offerings of a smaller amount of hours, that made more sense to me. Because I am here. My husband's technically still been here because they closed their office and they've been working at home. So he's here. There's people to make sure he's safe, but we weren't interacting with him. He was literally watching TV a lot. So I needed to get him out of the TV. I needed to have somebody that can interact with him, and create kind of a learning environment. So I wanted more than just somebody to just sit with him, because I didn't really need that. So it was probably more of my lack of knowledge on those other sides, but it ended up working out for the best.
That's great. So you had some clear definitions of what your expectations were and what
Yeah.
your priorities were, and I'm sharing that with the audience. It's always really great to understand what's important to you, and that could be just basic care needs, but that could also be a layer of curriculum. That could be health and safety. I know we had a question about, what if I want someone to be also doing light housekeeping and childcare duties, and that's also something that you can bake in. So I'll punt it over to Jenny and Crystal. Baram, please jump into, how did you think about sourcing nannies? Sounds like such a finding the right nanny. Like, what avenues did you go down, and share with us how you can kind of go in the a la carte approach of, I need this basic, I need this tier, or I need like the whole kit and caboodle.
Gosh, I wish that I knew, or I don't think no, you didn't exist when I had my 4-year-old in 2017. But exactly what Crystal Covington was describing is what I realized I needed, like this more a la carte sort of person. Like I said, I had left my job as a director. So when I gave birth to my daughter, I knew I wanted to start something. I ended up starting moms groups and It's a Parenting Approach classes, which were potentially, 4 hours per week. And I wanted this gradual process of separation more for me than her, which is why I didn't go the daycare route. I was just like so paralyzed by separating after, the IVF journey. Definitely a different story with my second. You're like such a different mom to each child. But anyway, when it came time to look, like I said, with those 3 questions, and after all of my years of hiring educators, I actually didn't go the usual route of like seeking word of mouth, which I think is so powerful. And I ended up going that route later on. But initially, I kind of, just put out there on different Facebook groups that I was looking, and I learned, that that's really now not so reliable. But it took some troubleshooting, long story short. And now I really do believe in using more intimate resources, so to speak, rather than these like huge resources. So, an agency is expensive, but something like a vetted person from Vivvi, or we have a parenting platform called Parenting Plus. So that's ended up being where I put, like, I'm in need of a nanny, and it was only like maybe 200 people on there. And of a friend who worked at Google, who saw a job posting. That's how I found my current nanny. So I really do believe in word of mouth on a smaller scale. Otherwise, you don't really know where that word of mouth is coming from. And so, like I said, I really do wish you guys existed then, because I think you know, you can go with your gut to an extent, but you really only know someone in an interview. And the questions I mentioned now that I used, you know, I think, you know, I have like a whole list of questions, but I think, you know, it takes more than just like one meeting, right, to really know, and maybe some trialing and stuff. So I guess long story short, I would say, yeah, more smaller communities for recommendations.
Yeah, I would say sort of the if you're coming from a smaller town or you know, if it's a part of New York City, like a Hudson River Mamas or Hudson Yards Mamas or Tribeca Mamas,
Right.
I think finding us some of those Facebook and social pages that are condensed, because you're typically going to be looking in that area, and you'll have people who are from that area that will be sharing really relevant experience, both on the one-to-one and the group childcare spaces as well. But I do like that idea of more targeted
Yeah.
bespoke groups for sure. Crystal, how about you? From
Um,
a nanny perspective.
Oh yeah, because yeah, Vivvi, when Yui was born, you guys didn't exist either. Um, so with her, how I found our nanny was through word of mouth. That's kind of how it ends up going. And the reason why that's important is because the friends that you make, the friends that you keep, usually have the same ideals as you. That's why you're friends usually. And so what would work for, say, my friend's daughter might just work for me as well. Uh, but yeah, I did need a lot of help because I was, thanks to family, thanks to a lot of support, I was able to stay home with her for that first year. But separating, quite like Jeannie said, was very hard. It was more so hard for me than it was for my daughter. My daughter was ready to say like, bye. I need, you're too big. I need to go hang out with these small people now. You know, she was ready to go, but I wasn't. So having a nanny, especially I guess for your first, was very important for me because it allowed me to kind of, you know, grieve being a stay-at-home mom to now being a working mom and all the guilt and baggage that unfortunately kind of comes with that.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, just making sure that you're always staying true to yourself, keeping those questions as streamlined as possible for your family, and just setting up expectations. The person that you're interviewing will let you know either yes or no, I can meet these expectations for you. But yeah, I needed someone to, you know, help with like cleaning, help with, you know, dishes every now and again. And I was breastfeeding my oldest, taking care of breast milk. I've had horror stories with my partner leaving out breast milk, and anyone who has pumped milk knows just how frustrating that can be. Yeah, I lost quite a bit of ounces on that, but you know, it's just setting up those expectations, understanding yourself, understanding your emotions, understanding that this person can meet your needs, meet your child's needs, and just have open lines of communications, you would be fine. And just their purpose is to just kind of pick up wherever you left off. So where I was taking her to the library, can you take her to the library? Can you keep these friends for her? Can you let me know if her teacher, because I think she started the TWO's program a little bit before she turned 2. Can you make sure that her teachers are getting these notes for me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, thank you.
Important.
You bring up an interesting, and I'm going to move into group care too, because a lot of what we're going to be saying, you're going to be wanting to ask a lot of the same questions about yourself and what's important to you, but also from the provider, whether it's a nanny or one-to-one versus group care, is really boiling down the logistics, like deciding truly what you want from the experience, whether it's from a family perspective or from your child's perspective. Is it important to you that it's full of curriculum and it is really about developmental composition throughout the day? Is it essential needs? Is it light housekeeping? Like really be able to state those expectations from the beginning. Deciding if you like control or there's a lack, or if you're not going to be having control over situations, and how much or how how comfortable you are with wanting to be in control or not being in control, because with that nanny, or depending on that situation, you will be the employer or you will be the boss. With our in-home program, it's nice because you are working with a whole team of people who are supporting the educator and supporting the family, so there's a little bit of that administration we take off the a lot of that administration we take off the plate. But if you are setting those expectations, like trying to understand how comfortable you feel about holding someone accountable for those expectations, and really managing to that, managing to schedules, thinking about pay ranges, and supporting you in that space. So I like to think that we might really think a one-to-one is important, but then when it comes down to it, I think some of the great things about being in a group childcare program is it's you kind of let them be the experts, and you can walk away from that relationship that you now have as a boss too. So just putting that into perspective. I don't know if anyone has anything to say about that before. Yeah.
So before I was going to do Vivvi in a group setting, I was actually seeking Vivvi at home. But I started noticing a couple of things with one of my twins where socially he just wasn't where he needed to be. We went through a couple of channels, and then we did discover that he is somewhere on the spectrum. That was one of my biggest motivating factors of changing from the in-home experience to the group setting experience. Axel and Ava have really only had each other. They were developing this twin dynamic that I could not pull them from, and they were in that age range where social development that's where it's really starting to take form. So I decided to scrap the idea of the Vivvi in home for our family and switch gears to Vivvi in person in a group setting because of those social emotional needs and challenges that my son will eventually is facing. Because that's the only way that he would be able to get over those things, is to make connections with other well, at the time 2.5, with other now 3-year-olds. He's doing very good. He's doing great. He's talking a lot more, expressing his needs. And these are things that typically, if you know anybody on the spectrum, that usually they have these challenges with. So I decided to switch gears, and I was afraid. Don't get me wrong, I was terrified. We still had this pandemic running amok, but I really had to weigh, socially, how much being home for him would set him back later on as he went on to preschool, kindergarten, middle school, versus this pandemic and the safety precautions that Vivvi in a group setting has put in place is amazing. Quick, attentive staff, attention to detail, everything. So it took off that burden to not only focus on the social and emotional needs that my child now has to have, is it's crucial for his development within this ASD space. And they have taken all of those needs that he has and integrated it completely. The teachers are willing. First of all, the teachers are very, very knowledgeable. They're very well read. And then even with all of the schooling that they've have, all of their accolades, they are still willing to learn. They haven't said, "Oh, I have my master's in this and this and that, and I'm done." No, they're like, there's still more things I need to learn about child development, because child development is always on the cusp of learning new things. And they've been learning. They're like, hey, this is a sensory need versus just a toy need. It's been such a great journey, and I cannot express enough how great the in-person model has been for our family, given the challenges that we have layered in there. So
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And it's been great to see them progress as I've been there too. And it sounds like health and safety, which we can talk very specifically about. I know people were really wanting kind of a checklist of what to look for as far as health and safety in a group care, as well as obviously curriculum and learning and development. It was really important to you, Crystal, and being in that group socialization setting. Jenny, as you were thinking about group care and setting up spaces, if you were to give advice on what to look for, if people are really contemplating the group childcare, what are some of the things they should be doing or they should be asking about, in addition to those wonderful questions you put at the top of the hour? What other logistical things should we look out for?
Absolutely. And I just want to say to Crystal Balaram's point that it's never too early to make first friends. And, you know, what we can do with just an adult and child, like, can't kind of compete with what children do together. You know, you can't create that besides bringing kids together. And I was able to see the magic of that. And it's why I felt so strongly about creating something for those that, you know, couldn't see that magic, you know, for whatever reason in a daycare setting or early childhood setting. Some of the most important things I'd say, you know, coming from the perspective of creating early childhood centers and giving tours, and what I would want parents to kind of ask and focus on in terms of safety and things like that is, of course, like the teacher-child ratio. You know, really learning what the minimum is and seeing if programs kind of go above and beyond that, you know, with support, you know, and again, I don't know the ratios at different centers, but I just know that that was important to me when creating centers, you know, that like a 1-to-4 might have been what we had to do for majority of the time, like, you know, but when the children were all awake, there's an ability to make sure that you can offer a little bit more. I think one of the benefits of group care settings is that children really do learn how to wait, how to, you know, they get to see kind of like, oh, it's his turn, then her turn. Making sure there's order and routine and reliability for the children is also paramount for safety, because children then are able to, you know, not climb up the walls, but they know after Roger, my diaper's changed.
Yeah.
The children are able to rely on that sort of order.
And to that note, it's absolutely okay and necessary to ask, like, what does a typical schedule look like for this classroom? And what are the typical health and safety perspectives, both pre-signing up, while you're a classmate, while you're a faculty member, during the day as far as sanitation and cleanliness, and then what goes on at night when kids aren't there, and then what are you doing, a whole other layer of COVID on top of the general health and safety. So I think when you're interviewing and going through virtual houses, open houses, and campus tours, as you said, like, you should be able to ask for that information, and it should be readily available.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and, you know, protocols for when, you know, there's an injury, or, you know, I hate to talk about it, but like a bite, or, you know, children are learning how to be together, but just making sure that there's open communication around things like that. I know Vivvi has an incredible communication when it comes to, you know, live updates on like things like diaper changes and what they, you know, all of that really is something that I think makes a parent feel comfortable and is related to health, you know, knowing when your child had a bowel movement. You know, if you're not a parent, you will care about that a lot. In terms of like how many ounces and food and how they, you know, store things, I think, you know, attention to detail. I think when parents tour, they often are asking about, you know, curriculum and how many photos can I see? And the truth is, like, I always wanted my staff to focus just on being present with the children. You know, that's a bonus if you're able to, when children are napping, in my mind, to be able to do that. So kind of like balancing that, you know, not really overemphasizing the parent communication in terms of the extra fun stuff, but you know, you want them to be like present with your child.
Right.
From a safety standpoint too.
Yeah, for sure. Crystal, Covington. As I'm listening to Jenny talk through this with respect to what to look for and what to talk about, and you have this wonderful balance of a program but an individual care need, which is so lovely, and the balance. And I'm wondering how have you set up the communication with your educator, given that it sounds like they're over there in the next room. It's all happening right in front of us right now. How have you found that structure and style as far as when to check in? And do you still expect some of the same things that Jenny is expecting from a group child care center as well?
So we went to, I was actually about to type my little note about group childcare is because I went to tons of them, and we actually are still on the list. We've been on the list for like 3 years for one that there was only one that I would consider. It's right in our neighborhood, so I could just literally like walk 2 blocks to it. They have never had an opening for us to even consider. But with those, it's a very different thing because I can't see my kid the same way. So I would expect them to be taking the pictures and stuff like that. I can kind of just see my child, and I can see when, I can tell when there's a struggle because he's going to be vocal about it. And I can tell when there might be things. And me and my husband will say, yeah, I saw that he was kind of saying, like, we have little household meetings where I saw that he was giving her a little trouble. Do you think that if we move this and there, she might have an easier time? Like, I don't even think she has to say anything because we figure it out quickly. And it's like, I think our kiddo is, today wasn't good. Should we put him to bed earlier? Maybe he was, tired. And then she asks questions. So before, it's just so easy. It's just really easy. So before, like yesterday, she was like, yeah, he doesn't like to do this so much with me. Does he do it with you? And she'll just ask. And it just kind of became a normal thing. And we don't even really expect the pictures and the reporting and stuff, except for things like, did he go to the bathroom? Because he was for a long time scared to go to the bathroom with anybody but me. He wouldn't let anybody take him to potty.
Yeah,
And
you
so
really care about like diapering for a little while, and then you let it go, and then when they're like potty training, you're very interested in what's going on.
Oh my goodness, the potty training was a unique experience because he only wanted to do it with me, and then he wouldn't go with her. And then sometime in the process, if he was trying to hold it for too long, it might end up on the floor. It was just so crazy. But it makes it really easy just because it's in the house. But I understand the difference with the in-homes, with the going to locations. And the one thing I wanted to say about that, even though I didn't choose to go that route, as a new mom, it was really overwhelming to go visit places. And I didn't even know what to look for. And then we would get overwhelmed. So we actually kept notes. And then as we were going to places, then we could go back and call and say, you know what, this place mentioned this. Did you say this? And it helped to, we keep all the little papers and go through our notes. And it helped to kind of get an understanding of what do we need if we did choose to go with group care. And that was really helpful because you don't even know what you need.
That is a beautiful reflection, and one that I'm channeling my 4 years ago self as well. I remember walking in and walking out and nothing stuck at that time.
Yeah.
So it is really great to go with someone else or have someone else join in, if it's your partner or if it's a family member or friend, and keep those notes. And from a group care perspective, it's also okay to go back, and it's okay to keep asking those questions. It's okay to meet a teacher or a head of school and really ask all the questions that you need. I think regardless if you're in an infancy stage or in the toddler preschool stage, there is going to be some sort of separation challenges, whether it's you on your own separating or your child, just because we have been with our children on a one-to-one basis for so long. So in any point, it's going to happen, whatever program we choose. So having that repeat visit or, anything, all the things that you need to do to make sure that you feel confident in your choice as well. Jenny, you're shaking your head. I wanted to see if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, that was something that, there's several things that I was grateful I knew about from having firsthand experience, because otherwise I would have been very shocked by. And one of them was knowing that there's that transition. Otherwise it's like, how would you know? It's not an indication that this wasn't the right choice, but I knew because I'd seen so many kids and would guide parents on it. And working with young kids, that just like us, any change or transition is a process. Saying goodbye even when we go to the bathroom in those early days is sort of a loss for them. Oh, you leave me, and we can't teach our children that we always come back unless we don't strap them on and bring them to the bathroom, and we can start small. Um, and yeah, had I not had all that experience, I would have kind of been shocked by that, seeing, there's not opportunity to see your child, cry from that loss when you're home with them until they start school. And that doesn't mean that it's a bad decision. It means that it's a growing decision and process.
I love that. Thank you for chiming in. Yeah.
I wanted to add that so we do actually still have transitions in the house where I think my son still is used to the fact that, dad's in the front office. He can always kind of go and see dad. And then sometimes I have to go away out of visibility where I sit in dad's office sometimes, or I'll sit at the counter. I sit all kinds of places. But when I have my calls, I will disappear into the basement, into this room. And so he's gotten to where sometimes if I need it to be perfectly quiet for an important meeting, I will have to do a transition and let them know I have a meeting. You can't come downstairs right now and play, and do a hug and everything. So just knowing that she's always around me and I can get to her, but now I can't, is still a big deal, even within the home, which is so interesting.
I feel that here too. Thank you for sharing that. And Jessica is back with one more question, I think, before we bring it up to the audience. So, Jessica, over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I love this group. You guys really represent so much sort of like the new age of working parents in terms of your flexibility and the types of jobs that you have. And I would love if you could talk a little bit about how you find childcare for those sort of flexible work situations that so many more parents are finding themselves in, whether you have a nanny or in-home care or daycare. Like, how do you decide how much you need? Do you end up getting more childcare than your office hours are for an extra like out to dinner night? What were some of the decisions that you made in order to figure out how and when to to implement your childcare?
I can just start by saying that I started with like minimal because, like I said, I was like very hesitant and felt like if I did more, it was too big a step. And then it took troubleshooting to realize, and with both my kids, now I have the most childcare I've ever had with two and working full time. But I don't think I could have or would have started with that. I think it really depends on like the ebbs and flows of your life and your journey with career and the age of your children. I think early on, your children need more one-on-one when they're super young. I think it even matters when they're able to use the bathroom on their own, right? If you have two kids in diapers, and I know that sounds nuanced, but I think, yeah, like I think instead of starting for what exactly you need, just know that I would suggest something that's flexible. Maybe you could add hours on if it's a daycare, or maybe it's a caregiver, nanny you've hired, and you can say, as the children get older, are you okay with like your responsibilities changing? Maybe you can help with the kids' laundry as they maybe have more time in school, or they're able to get themselves dressed more, as an example. So I'd say finding something with flexibility is what I look for now, because I know that things change. We could find ourselves home and we need more care, at the drop of a hat right now. So
Either ladies?
Just to echo Jeannie's response, flexibility is honestly key. Right now, myself and my husband does production work. So we're now trying to scale up to a bigger studio in Astoria. And that has come with a lot of challenges. So, I do have to leave all three. The oldest is now in after school. Um, they just need a little bit more wait time. We have discussions at the table. Hey, what are your current interests now? Are you into dancing? Are you into music more? Are you into art more? And then we kind of just tailor their extracurricular needs around their interests. With Axel and Ava, because of their age, Vivi kind of handles all of that in terms of, making sure that they're knowing their letters or knowing their numbers, but socially they're meeting with their friends, they're playing, they're getting their wiggles out. They're dancing around, they're learning different things, they're getting a broad spectrum kind of base in knowledge. So I'm okay with just leaving them there for the full duration of time that we need. And there's also a time that we need to decompress as well. So sometimes, we could be there to pick them up at 4, but that extra hour of just breathing and everything that all the decisions that I make and hopefully everyone else will make, hopefully just makes you a better parent. And that is what dictates what we need at that point in time.
I think that's a wonderful way to answer that question. And it also does get to the place of matching what's important for you and your children with also just your logistics. So as you're thinking about price ranges, which can in New York City seem really astronomical, some things that you could consider, especially for group childcare, are how long are they open? Do they have a flexible schedule? Can you do 2 days? Can you do 3 days? Can you do a full day? For instance, we at Vivvi we're open from 7 to 7, and that is purposeful because we understand that working parents have lots of different things that they have to take care of in the day. Sometimes that is an entire day of work, and sometimes that could be, booking a doctor's appointment for yourself, or, having some space to decompress with your partner. And so the price reflects the curriculum, the high touch, as well as the availability for a strong team to be there 12 hours a day times 5, right? So thinking about what's important to you, that'll kind of help you cross-reference what is included in the price as well. Okay. I think I'm going to jump into some questions. So I have one in the chat that I'm going to go to now, and then I'd love for people, if you have questions right now, to just start jumping in either on the Q&A function or the chat function. The first question I have is recommending handling benefits for a one-to-one nanny. Jenny, would you mind jumping on this, since you've had some experience with nannies as well as on the front end and the back end of things? How do you handle, I would say, benefits, schedule, time off? Could you speak to that at all?
Yeah, this was definitely a learning process for me too. Like I didn't even know about that, how kind of formal it really should be. And it makes sense, right? These are people who are relying on this as their career most of the time. So I would say, instead of, I never really approached it as this is our package, take it or leave it. I think when the right candidate came along, and if we were able to meet those needs, that's kind of how, I approached it. Obviously, I knew within, a certain level of what we needed, hours, and, what we could afford, and all of that. But I think, again, this is something where asking friends and these smaller communities where you can get trustworthy sources, and maybe they'd feel more comfortable sharing those things, and maybe some contracts that they've used they could share, are really helpful. So I definitely would ask friends, because obviously you don't really know what's unreasonable to ask or what's reasonable and expected. And so I learned all of that through, smaller communities, like I mentioned earlier.
I think that's a great suggestion, and I'll just share with my nanny search. To I think an earlier question about smaller communities and the follow-up and not on social media. I am not really on social media either, but it was really important to me to join the Facebook pages that I now don't really keep in touch with, but they were essential for me to find my nanny. And I find that a lot of people who are so thrilled with their caretaker are happy to share that information with you, and then happy to be a reference. And then when you are asking those references and you're interviewing them and you're asking about the candidate, it's also okay to say, can you share with me how you've paid her, what that contract looked like, and what was built in, so that I can understand expectations as well. Anyone else would weigh in? Yeah, go for it, Crystal.
When we went through a service for our first, and we were totally at a loss too with what we did with benefits, and the only drawback to services is, of course, their upfront fees. Of course, they can be quite egregious, but one of the benefits were getting all of those benefit packages together, paying taxes. They had, like, again, see what you're getting for the cost. Like, they had an a la carte, like, hey, when you're done with your nanny, this is what you're filing, this is what it is. And they guided us through all of that. So, back to your point of finding out what you're really paying for is very key. So sometimes those services for first time is kind of helpful.
It's also okay to do an intro call with a nanny service to see what they are asking and what they are providing, because then even if you don't go that route, you have information that you can take back with you and do your own search or formulate your own structure around that. So staying on the nanny vein, how do you navigate encouraging / requiring your own expectations, but at the same time allowing the day to go naturally and unfold, and for your nanny to have independence and ownership? Any thoughts out there?
I was gonna say Crystal Covington maybe, but I don't know if she feels, because I know that you have that. But I just want to say that, your child shouldn't grow up expecting that every adult is the same, right? Similar to, the thoughts that many of us have, if I don't do bedtime, it will go wrong. And maybe that's the case, but they're learning to be able to put to bed by more than you. That was definitely something I had to learn. And so, of course, like, you need to think about where they're getting completely conflicting messages and things. Like, you should obviously be aligned in terms of like behavior management. Like, I don't believe in timeouts, or I believe in taking break, that type of stuff. But I think in terms of the other stuff, a lot of people ask me, which I didn't get into, I love play and play ideas. It's okay if your nanny plays differently than you. If you're used to using things in your kitchen and your nanny's used to doing something that's a little bit more structured, that's, those aren't necessarily like conflicting things in a child's life. They just know people play differently. But like I said, I think when it comes to things like how you approach potty training and how you approach behavior, and responding to behavior, that to me is most important. So yeah, for that question, I think give them ownership beyond that.
And I think you can have those conversations at the front end. Yeah. These are the things that are important to me. Aside from that, I'm going to let you go. And then you can hold that person accountable to that. And then that might change along the way. And you can always regroup and have, your family meeting and say, these are the things that are now important to me. And I hope we can ensure that this happens. We are really, really right about at time. So I wanted to continue this conversation for like 30 seconds to 1 more minute if we have a question that we haven't answered. But if not, I wanted to also say thank you to these ladies. I actually feel like I could just chat with you all day. There's so many really wonderful tips that are coming out of your life stories with childcare. And so thank you so much for sharing just a little bit of what it takes to raise a child and think through childcare solutions. I hope that you are all leaving with some tools in your toolboxes, but you're always welcome to reach out to us at Vivvi for more information about the Vivvi on-campus programs, the Vivvi in-home programs, but in general, how we can be supportive in finding the right childcare solution for you, whether it's with Vivvi or elsewhere. So please reach out to us and keep those questions coming. Thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.